Hello, I'm Bob Peters, host of Salute. Welcome to Salute. And I have a guy that I've been wanting on my show for quite a while. He's in this book, Faces of the Distinguished Flying Cross of Lake County. We'll talk a little bit more about the book later. But this is Major Barny Barnhart. Good to see you, buddy.
Good to be here finally.
You know, your group is quite the group. We've had about 3 or 4 of them on here already.
That's what I understand. I've seen a couple of them.
Yeah. And you lost Ken Taylor, which is a great guy.
Was a shame.
But anyhow, we're here to talk about Barny Barnhart. So Barny, I want you to tell me a little bit about yourself, where you're originally from, and how'd you get in the Air Force and fly that baby?
Okay, well, I'm basically originally a Kansas farm boy. Grew up in Kansas, Missouri, several different places during my early lifetime. But college time, I went to University of Kansas, which is about 30 miles from where I lived, and was never in the ROTC or anything like that. Didn't even think about being in the military. But eventually, Vietnam, of course, came along, and it got very active amongst my age group. And I was always worried about getting drafted, but being in college, I felt I was pretty safe. Of course, eventually I graduated, and that's when I went to see a recruiter, Air Force recruiter, because I was afraid of being drafted in the Army. I didn't want that. I'm not a guy that likes running around the jungle shooting people. So when I graduated, I went to interview with a recruiter, Air Force recruiter, and he said, well, I can protect you. If you sign up with us, he said, they can't touch you. So I did, and after I graduated, and had to go to basic training, which is an officer candidate possibility. I wouldn't have had to go to basic training normally, but in order to protect me, they had to have me in their clutches, and they sent me to basic training down at Lackland Air Force Base to do that. While I was at Lackland, my mother got a letter in the mail drafting me into the Army. She calls me up one day and says, your draft letter's here, what do I do with it? I said, throw it in the trash. They can't touch me. And that's the way I kept out of the Army and ended up in pilot training.
Yeah, you said when you signed up, after basic, is that when you said, I want to be a pilot? And
when I signed up originally with the recruiters, I signed up as a candidate for pilot training. And I had to go to basic training so they could protect me. Normally, pilot training candidates don't go to basic training. They go right to...
That's why I never met one there.
That's why they go right to pilot training. And they go through a whole year of training, including all the basic training stuff that the guys normally get, and then graduate eventually after a year of training as a co-pilot usually in something, or a pilot candidate. And that's what I did.
So what did you start out flying in? You know, I know World War II, they were in a Stearman, you know, little biplanes. So obviously you didn't.
I was actually privileged to be in the first class of the little Cessna 337, basically.
Oh.
I think that was the right designation. I'm trying to remember now. But anyway, it was a little Cessna, 1 engine. And they trained us in that first, trying to see if we could even be pilots before they wasted money on the jet trainers. And I graduated from that initial 6 weeks or so of training and went into T-37s, which is a little 2-engine jet trainer, 2 seats side by side, where you learn how to fly a jet airplane. And then from that, after half a year or so of that, I went into T-38s, which is the supersonic jet trainer, so that you can get into the supersonic jet planes the Air Force had to offer after you graduate. And it was a whole year of training to do that.
Okay, and then so all this training is done where?
Multiple bases around the country. I was at Vance Air Force Base in Enid, Oklahoma, which I enjoyed, just south of Oklahoma City, and did my whole year there with maybe 50, 60 other pilot trainees. And we all graduated at the end of that year with choices depending on our graduation status, number 1 in class, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so on. I couldn't get into the fighter planes, which I wanted to do because I wasn't high enough in my class. There were only a few of those, and they went first always. So I ended up coming out of there and having to choose a B-52 co-pilot job. And I enjoyed it. I went to Carswell Air Force Base in Texas, down in Fort Worth, Texas, and flew in the right seat as a co-pilot.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know this. I'm going to spill the beans here.
Uh-oh.
When you go down to Orlando Airport,
Oh.
and you pull in the Orlando Airport, there's a B-52 on the side. And
That was one of my airplanes I flew. It came from Carswell Air Force Base to be displayed there. They flew it in and put it out on that display pad. And when I saw it, when I moved to Orlando, or moved to the Orlando area, I saw it out there and started looking at it. And well, where'd that come from? And I got into the research of it a little bit and found out it came from Carswell Air Force Base. And I flew all the airplanes when I was there.
yeah, I was in the Air Force too, as you know. And I was at Utapau, and we used to have a lot of the B-52.
That was a B-52 base.
Oh, it was, yeah. We'd send a ball game up with 30 of them at a time.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Kadena would send up 15, and Guam would send up 15. So there'd be, 60 planes up there bombing. But it's an amazing airplane, and I wish
Big old thing, isn't it?
I wish I had the keys, Barney.
Yeah, right.
Take me for a ride.
That would be fun, but it's awfully big and bulky, and I mean, it was a very good experience for me to get to fly that. And occasionally the pilot would let me sit in the left seat, and he would sit in the right seat, and I'd get to experience, because I was supposed to be upgraded eventually to pilot in command on the left side. I only stayed there for a couple of years, so.
How many years did you do in the Air Force?
I did 21 total.
21 total?
Yeah, I did a whole career in the Air Force.
So when you flew the B-52s, you did not fly those in Nam?
No, I was only peacetime.
Stateside.
Cold War status, they call those, with missions to fly into Russia if you had to. And a number of times I'd be on alert, which we did in a B-52, with the position of maybe getting launched to Russia if the war starts,
Yeah.
And so we did 24-hour duty doing that. And a couple times they'd launch us we didn't know what was real or not, and head up toward the north, and I flew up to the North Pole a couple of times and got turned around when I got up into Alaska and said, nope, you're not going. And then we'd turn around and come back home. Those were almost 24-hour missions.
Wow.
So that's a long time sitting in that seat.
Yeah, I'll bet. They pressurize the cabin, has to be pressurized,
Yes,
right?
cabin's pressurized, yes.
It's not like the old days in World War II when they had to have the pressurized suits because the planes didn't have pressure.
No. We had oxygen, of course, in case we lost pressurization or something, but it was a pressurized cabin just like most of the other airplanes.
Yeah, and originally they had the gunner in the rear.
And the gunner was in the rear on the older models, like I flew the E, the F, the D. They all had the gunner in the rear. The G and the H models, the newer ones, put the gunner up with the navigators down in the bottom of the airplane underneath the pilots. And it was all done automatically then. They still had a gun, but it was all done automatically.
Yeah. What kind of cargo could they carry as far as bombs go?
500-pounders primarily, of course, nuclear bombs they could carry. And that's the ones we took up to the North Pole with, assuming we might have to go to Russia.
Yeah.
But I don't remember now the number of bombs we could carry, but there was a lot. And they used them a lot in Vietnam, bombing North Vietnam.
So you were with the B-52s, and after a while, somehow we wound up in Vietnam in that baby, right? The RF-4 Phantom. Yeah.
Made by
how did you make
Douglas.
that switch?
Well, I flew the B-52 for a couple of years, and being a young single pilot, it wasn't that much fun. And I
wasn't fast enough.
I was not fast enough. I was looking for some fun, and so I went to my local recruiter that had to do with assignments and said, hey, they're desperately in need of pilots over in Vietnam. If I volunteered, what could I fly? He said, you tell me what you want. And so I decided, well, I'm going to do it. So I volunteered to go to Vietnam, and I got to select the airplane, RF-4C Phantom, which was impossible to get out of pilot training because there were so very few of them.
Now you have to explain to people watching this what the RF Phantom was versus the regular Phantom.
Okay, the F4 is the same airplane, whether it's the RF version or an F version, same engines, all that kind of stuff. It just has no weapons at all. And
so you volunteered to fly a plane with no weapons.
I didn't know any better. But it has no weapons. In place of the weaponry, there are sensors, they call them. Cameras, infrared, side-looking radar, all of those things to take pictures, basically, of the ground and the enemy. And we had 2 seats in there. The front seat was the pilot flying it, pilot in command. The back seat started out to be also a pilot. The guys in my pilot training class that went to RF4 had to start in the back seat, and they were the ones that operated all the sensors, all the cameras, and did the navigating for the pilot, so all he had to pay attention to really was flying the airplane. Although he had control of all that up front too if he needed to. But the airplane basically had 2 functions in the seats, and that was to fly the airplane and to run all the equipment. The back guy did all the equipment. What's the other question?
Oh yeah, I asked you how you got into it, but let's go. I want to hear more about the airplane.
Okay.
All right, because I read about it in the book, and your story here in the book, but. Primarily, you were flying the canals.
Well,
and tell us about how you do that.
Wherever the bad guys were, we were seeking to gather intelligence on where they were, so we could tell the ground people, and they could go take care of them, or they could use our information to avoid certain gun sites or something. Maybe we would fly the canals in South Vietnam because that's where a lot of the bad guys were, and the Navy, of course. And the Army would go up and down the river looking for the bad guys. And we'd run what we called a strip, photographic strip, down a canal, and then take it back, and it would be all developed in the labs, and they could expand it or contract it, whatever they needed to do in order to find intelligence on that film. Then they would report that to whoever needed to know. And we flew missions day and night, and we also had the photo flash capability on the cameras in the back, in this tail section back here. There was a door that opened and photo flashes would go out. And when those things flashed, the camera would be running and we could take night pictures.
Yeah.
And so that's what we did in the South Vietnamese area and also in Laos and sometimes Cambodia, although we weren't supposed to be there. But after I was in Vietnam, and I went to Tan Son Nhut Air Base, is where I was assigned after I got out of training. Well, let me start to the beginning of that. First, after I was going to an RF, they sent me to Shaw Air Force Base, South Carolina, which is where we trained in the RF and how to fly the RF-4 and use the equipment. And we did that for 6-8 months. I don't remember the exact time now. But then got assigned to our base. And I was going directly to Vietnam, so I went directly from there to Tan Son Nhut Air Base. And really learned more about that mission, flying it in combat, than I'd learned at Shaw. But that's the way the process worked.
Yeah. But when you flew the canals, you didn't just do a slow little...
Well, it depends.
Really?
If there was no, like down South Vietnam, it was fairly safe. I mean, it didn't have, we, the U.S., had pretty good control of the South Vietnamese area as far as air weapon systems and stuff that the bad guys would have. They couldn't keep them there. They couldn't hide them. So mainly it was individuals shooting at us, you know, down in South Vietnam. So we could fly a canal at 2,000 feet, let's say, which is pretty low, and run a straight run down the canal without worrying about being shot at. And the cameras were running the whole time. Now, about halfway through my assignment at Tan Son Nhut, I volunteered for, I was dumb to volunteer for things sometimes, but I volunteered.
I learned very fast when I went, so you never volunteer.
But I was young and wanted to learn new things, and ended up volunteering to be a forward air guy. And basically what that was, my call sign was yo-yo, up and down, you know, yo-yo. That's what we used as a call sign. And we did fast forward air control kind of stuff up in Laos primarily. My responsibility was the Ho Chi Minh Trail, from the South Vietnamese border all the way up to the North Vietnamese border, and finding the bad guys in there. And it was a single mission by myself. It wasn't a bunch of us, just at one time, I mean. There was probably 6 of us that did it, all day and night. But we flew up and down the Ho Chi Minh Trail looking for the truck parks primarily, and because they'd hide during the day. Mm-hmm. And with our photographic capabilities, we could find the truck parts, even though they were hidden under leaves and branches and stuff. We could sometimes locate it, and we'd get that information off of the film and launch a regular F4 or F-105 or something on it. Or occasionally, I've got some photographs that I took of a B-52 strike up on the trail, and my goodness, how they destroyed the ground for miles.
And they call, it's 1 square mile they could do.
Oh, it was just amazing. Just
carpet
completely
bombing.
Obliterate everything in the path.
Carpet bombing,
when we found a target for them. So that's what I did the last half of my mission over there, was fly the Ho Chi Minh Trail.
When you say yo-yo, did you ever think about, well, when you're flying, let's say like in Laos and you're doing the trail, yo-yo, does that mean you're going up and down like this?
Yeah. And left and right.
Yeah, to avoid being shot at?
Yeah, because they shot at us a lot up there. They had control of that territory pretty much. So they had high-speed weaponry. They had some SAMs even occasionally, surface-to-air missiles. I got a picture in my collection of a guy, an RF-4, that got shot by a surface-to-air missile up over the North Vietnamese border. And it shows his wingman was taking the pictures with his camera as the whole thing was going on. And they got him first when the missile launched. You see it coming up off of the ground in the photograph. The next section showed him getting hit, and the next section showed him exploding. And then the last one shows him getting bailed out. He ended up in North Vietnamese prison and didn't survive, by the way, through the whole time. So.
Yeah, well, did they ever like try to, okay, you're flying and they say, here he comes, and they call down the road and say,
oh, all the time.
Yeah.
That was,
we'll be waiting for you when you get here?
That was a typical thing that they did. They'd be up the road and get a phone call from the guy down the road, here he comes. And they knew we were going to stay on the trail, up and down, right and left and all that, and taking pictures whenever we needed to. And they would just fill the air full of weaponry, full of bullets.
Wow.
And you'd hope that you didn't find, and every once in a while, I could see them. You could see them coming up by your canopy and stuff, you know. And very scary.
Yeah, I'll bet.
But I never got hit.
Thank goodness for that. So, how long did you do this in Vietnam?
That last part of the explanation was probably about 6 months.
Yeah.
The last half of my tour.
Okay, so you did a tour over the, and was this near the end of your career?
No, actually it was in the beginning. I was just a brand new captain when I got over there. Probably 3 or 4 years in. And I ended up spending a total of 21 years in the Air Force. So I came back to the States and did all kinds of other things.
There's some very good pictures in this book, and one of them is one of your planes, and you went for one hell of a ride. And you want to talk a little bit about that? I mean, that was something.
Yeah, that happened to be a late evening night mission that I was flying in South Vietnam, probably up on the trail. But I got halfway through the mission and started having failures in the airplane, in the cockpit. electric went out and I lost my electricity. So I headed back toward Saigon, toward Tan Son Nhut, knowing that I needed to get it on the ground if I could. And I made contact with the controllers, emergency contact, and they prepared everything for me to get in. But as I was flying back, I also lost some other things. And when I went to put my nose gear, my total gear down, 2 main wheels and a nose wheel, the nose gear didn't come down at all. Main wheels came down and locked, but the nose gear didn't. And you don't land a jet airplane with no nose gear usually.
Yes.
But
it's not the preferred method.
No, I thought, well, you know, it's either that or bail out. I don't want to bail out. It's got a flyable airplane here, even though there's some things wrong with it. And I talked to my guy on the radio that was in charge back there and said, I'm going to try to land it. And he said, okay, we'll set up the runway for you. And as I was coming in to do a landing on the lit runway and everything, I realized that it had a barrier across the runway to catch the tail hook in case you needed to. Well, that barrier, if I landed a little bit in front of it, would end up cutting my head off in the cockpit because it'd go right up the nose. And
oh, wow.
So I thought, well, that's dumb. I don't want to take a chance. I didn't have any fuel left. I was out of fuel. So at the last few minutes, I told them, I'm going to land on the other runway. It doesn't have a barrier. It wasn't lit, wasn't ready to go or anything.
It wasn't foamed? Was it foamed?
No.
No?
No.
Oh.
Because they thought I was going to land on the other runway.
Yeah, I hear.
So I switched over and they flipped the lights on. I landed on that runway. Didn't have a barrier, so I didn't have to worry, but I had no steering, of course. Excuse me. So a few 100 feet down the runway with no steering, I ended up going off the side of the runway into the dirt. And then I was really worried because there was a guard shack out there off of that side of the runway to watch airplanes coming in and landing and be able to talk to them. I almost hit the guard shack, but I missed it. And the centerline tank, which is on the center line of the airplane, was now lying on the ground instead of being up above the ground because of the nose wheel being over. And it burst and caused a big flash and explosion, and was trying to catch the airplane on fire. When I stopped, there was a lot of fire going on. The fire trucks, of course, being right there close, could get there within a minute or two, and they were out there spraying foam and everything over the airplane when I was jumping out. But we climbed out of the airplane real quickly, and I ended up getting about 15 feet away from the airplane, and a lanyard that was attached to my harness and attached to the seat, I had forgotten to unloose. So it yanked me off my feet about 15 feet in the airplane. My navigator fortunately saw it happen, came real fast to me and helped me undo my lanyard, and then we both ran away from the fire. But I was very lucky to be alive after that.
Yeah, I think I read in the book you went 5,000 feet.
Total about 5,000 feet down the runway before it stopped.
Yeah, wow.
Most of it off of the runway.
Well, I'm glad you made it, brother.
I am
you
too.
and your buddy.
I am too.
We have about 5 minutes left. So after this stint in Vietnam,
yes,
because now we still got a whole lot of military career
right.
Left. So where did you, briefly, where did you go? What did you fly? And
because I liked flying that airplane, I stayed with it. I was able to volunteer for an assignment at Shaw Air Force Base as an instructor pilot. And I instructed at Shaw for a while, and after a few years of that, I went to Bergstrom Air Force Base in Austin, Texas, and worked in a squadron there, and then ended up most of the rest of my career in staff jobs. Excuse me.
I'm going to talk a little bit about what we got behind us here.
Oh, I haven't seen that for a few years, but knowing I was coming here, I thought maybe you'd enjoy it.
I do, yeah. But this is when you first started, because you retired as a major, right?
Yes, yes.
And this is a captain
in Vietnam as a captain. And also, normally you'd have a star up there after a time, but I was still just a young pilot, so I just had the single wings. But there's a lot of stress in that job. And so,
I would think so, yeah.
So to get rid of some of the stress, I think it was every Saturday night, we'd have a party at the officers club, or sometimes it was even in the barracks that we were staying in. And one of the guys decided, hey, we're going to do this all the time. Let's get a party suit that looks like a flight suit, but we can make it whatever color we want. And so we picked blue and put whatever patches we wanted on it. And this is the RF4C patch here. And this one here says El Fantumo Chaparral, just made up again for fun. Phantom pilot, yeah. And over here is my 100 mission patch. And this was the squadron I was in. And this is a little nickname that we called ourselves, Knob Dodgers. And we wore these at this party just to relieve the stress a little bit, and we always had fun.
Excuse me. 100 missions. How many missions did you do?
198.
Wow. Wow, that's a lot. That's a lot. So now you're happily retired and living in the villages.
Correct.
And you have your association, Distinguished Flying Cross of Central Florida.
Yeah, it's a society, they call it.
Society. And like I said, we've had a few of you guys on the show, and I'd like to get a few more because you guys are quite interesting.
Yeah,
and,
I'm also a member, just to give them a little credit, of the Vietnam Veterans Association. They're Chapter 1036.
As am I.
Yeah.
As am I, yeah.
I know I've seen you at the meetings a couple times.
Yeah, I don't get down there as much as I'd like to. I've got responsibilities, but
Sure.
it's not about me right now. It's about you. So they do a lot of great stuff. In fact, Vietnam Veterans Appreciation Day.
Today, Friday the 29th, and what's 29th today,
29th, yeah.
was a celebration at the square, where the Veterans Square there, where they have the bricks and everything today. I started out there and then I had to leave real quick and come on down here.
Okay, well, I got to wrap it up, Barney. But before I do, welcome home, brother.
Thank you very much. Same to you.
And once again, the book is called Faces of the Distinguished Flying Cross of Central Florida, and they want to get a copy. What do they do? How do they do that?
Well, it's available on, drawing a blank of the name now.
Amazon?
Amazon.
That's why I'm here.
You can get it on Amazon, but it's a little expensive there. And we have book signings around the area periodically. If you'll keep an eye on the paper, the Sun, the Daily Sun, the Villages, it'll tell you when. But we've got one coming up shortly. So.
Okay, well, it's time to say goodbye, and I want you to join me in doing this. To all our veterans out there, our active military and their families, we salute you for all you do. Till next time.